Welcome everybody to VFX and Chill. We are here live, and I'm very excited for today's show. How about you, Seth?
Good God, I'm excited. Yes, this is like such an exciting set of guests we have today.
Absolutely. I mean, to jump right in, because why wait? We are here with John LePore and Doug Appleton, Johnny Motion and Dougosaurus. Go find them. They are from the amazing studio Perception. Perception has been working with Marvel since 2009 and has created, if you see cool moving graphics and things on screens, or if you've seen a Marvel Studios logo, these people have made the award-winning title sequences for them, for the HUDs and all the acronyms.
The VIDEOs.
I made...
Yeah.
But anyway, Perception is largely responsible for the look of many Marvel movies. They've worked recently on Black Widow, Black Panther, Ant-Man, Wasp, Thor, Ragnarok. You've even dabbled in DC. If you see something on a screen in a Marvel movie, responsible. And one of the cool things about Perception is that some of their movies into real usable tech in the automotive and probably other world places that I don't know. But that's my sloppy introduction to two very talented Emmy-nominated people right here with us today. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Daniel.
Hello. That was a lovely intro.
Absolutely, it was wonderful to have you all. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you guys.
All right, we'll be right back.
So yeah, you can see above us some of the lovely work available.
Let me go back to it.
Here
we go.
Oh yeah, there we go. The Disney Plus exciting exploration of the expanded Marvel non-cinematic, or I don't know. It's MCU still. I don't know. Yeah.
It's all MCU. It just keeps expanding. You know, they weren't joking when they called it the expanding universe. It keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Yes. Now, WandaVision is an exciting, interesting like genre experiment that is on Disney Plus, and hopefully you all have seen it. I don't know what we may or may not spoil as we step through things, but right now what we're taking a look at are the amazing end credits, which I have to assume are inspired by basically being inside. It's like inside the Matrix, if the Matrix were the RGB cells of an old television.
Wait, aren't we all inside the Matrix? Technically, like, isn't that?
But this is a Matrix inside of the Matrix.
Okay, so you guys have spent considerable amount of time in the Matrix, inside the Matrix, in order to create this, I would assume.
Yes, it's a double Matrix.
Double Matrix all the way. These are my freaking favorite titles in the world. Sorry, I just want to put that on record. I've seen you guys present on these at. I think at like a Maxon company meeting, you did a 3D motion show at one point too, and talked about them. And even then, I was just like, I want more of this. I want more of them talking about these titles because they're so good.
They are so good.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear.
I heard that I might have an echo on the show. Let me know if that has disappeared or if I'm still echoing. But I don't think we can hear it from our end, so just let us know, audience.
I've just been repeating everything you've said.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, is that not what we're supposed to do?
No, it's good. Keep going. Seriously, you've earned the right. Go right ahead. So yeah.
Incredible. So
Hashi, go ahead, man. We're really good at this.
Yeah. So 2009 is what I know as your first interaction with Marvel as the studio experience, or as Perception. How did that come about? I mean, I feel like if you're fishing for work, catching a Marvel whale is very exciting.
So no question, it was something that we were hunting for a long time. And it actually goes back before 2009, I guess maybe as early as 2007 or so. The two owners of Perception, Danny Gonzalez and Jeremy Lasky, have been like lifelong Marvel fans. And there was just around that point in time, there was just starting to be rumors that like they were going to make a movie about Iron Man, and they were also going to make a movie about Hulk at the same time. And the two owners were angling very hard to try and get in the mix with Marvel to make some title sequences or do anything else that we could do with them. We were a very small studio at the time. Mostly like our entire portfolio was just making television commercials and broadcast promos and very traditional motion graphics boutique kind of work, circa 2007 or so. We ended up getting our foot in the door with a small like subset of Marvel who were making direct to DVD animated films. And they were like, well, like, would you guys make us a title sequence for one of these things? And we were just like, yeah, absolutely, of course. And we went so overboard on these, straight to DVD animated features and made like the most like epic and super cinematic title sequences that we possibly could. And they loved it. They were super ecstatic about it. And so around the time that they were working on Iron Man 2, which was, the first Iron Man had come out, was an explosive success. And Marvel Studios as like a thing was still like, I don't know if anybody there was even thinking like, oh, this is going to change the rest of, cinema for the next decade or whatnot. I think they were just like, hey, why don't we see if we can make like one or two sequels for these things and keep this moving along. They were making Iron Man 2 and they needed some on-set graphics playback. There's a scene where Tony Stark is doing a presentation at the Stark Expo and he's giving like a keynote speech kind of thing. And I think they may have had some graphics already and they just weren't happy with them. And they were all like, crap, what are we going to do to, find something else? How can we get some stuff together like really quickly that we can slam in there? And one of the producers at that point, who had used to work on these smaller straight-to-DVD animated films as Marvel Studios was maturing rapidly, he had been promoted up into a point where he was working on Iron Man 2, and he said, oh, I know these guys in New York. They'll be able to whip up something like really quick. So we got, a random call out of the blue, and, it kind of blew our minds. We were all freaking out, jumping up and down in the studio, running around in circles, and did whatever we could just to put some really rad stuff together to hopefully get them all really excited.
Oh my gosh, that's so tremendous.
And that scene you're talking about,
I can't imagine.
The scene you're talking about is from Iron Man 2, and it was where he's got the glass phone. Is that the one? And he's like,
So it started even smaller than that. It just started as like there's like a presentation that he's giving and there's a big projection screen behind him that he's standing in front of that just needs to have branding stuff on it. Really easy stuff to do. We went into like overdrive on it. And while we were on a call with them and like pitching concepts to them, we heard somebody in like the back of the room be like, oh, that one with the like glass material, that kind of looks like his glass phone. And we're all like, what? Did you say glass phone? What was, what's that all about? Tell us more about that. And so as we finished this thing that was just supposed to be like a relatively boring, like PowerPoint presentation for Tony Stark, we made over a weekend just a really quick mock-up of like, what would Tony Stark's glass phone look like? What would be a sort of like, how could we mock up an interface for this thing that could be really cool and really exciting looking? And we pitched it to them completely unprompted. And they were actually really stoked about it. They were really excited. And they said, all right, well, why don't you guys make his phone? And then also he's got like a glass coffee table. He's got a bunch of glass windows in his apartment. And like this tiny little like PowerPoint presentation thing that we were making quickly turned into, I think it was like 125 shots on the film.
And
we were asked
and
to
just
to work on.
To clarify, you guys had not been asked to spend the weekend prototyping the phone, had you? Was that just on you guys, or had somebody actually asked you to do that at that point?
No. Oh, no. This was like, we didn't, no one even gave us a brief on this phone. We just heard that. We literally overheard in the background of a call someone say Tony Stark's glass phone, and we were just like, "Well, that sounds cool." I actually have.
I was gonna say, do you have that video?
Yeah, I was sorry if it looks like my eyes are darting around. I was just pulling it up, and I finally found this ancient file.
See if I can pull up.
So we went to Home Depot, had them cut a piece of rectangular glass that was at the approximate sort of like aspect ratio size of a iPhone, which at that point in time was still like a very new sort of thing just to exist. So here, let me play this. So there's my floated hands.
How did you present this? Like, were you like, oh, hey, we happen to make this? Like, how did you bring it into conversation?
It wasn't easy, and we were such noobs at this sort of stuff, and so foreign to working with the team at Marvel that I think probably was just kind of sent to them and just like, hey, please, if you can get Mr. Favreau to look at this for 20 seconds, we would be ever so grateful. And so the part that I didn't bring up is that we sent this. It went to them. We didn't hear anything for months. And that was because they were just making their movie. They were still putting this movie together and whatnot. We thought like, oh boy, did we really upset them by sending this over there their way. And a few months later, because they reached out to us because they were heading into the post-production process, and they said, okay guys, we're ready to have you start like making the phone. And we're like, what? Really? We're gonna do that? And we just dove right in, and it was from there. It was full on like baptism by fire, for our first feature film project.
That's unreal. That's ridiculous.
Seth, I believe John's audio is doubled from his screen share, so if you would kill one of those audio sources, that would be excellent.
Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Love it. So you started the VFX journey at a Home Depot, which I
as we all do.
Yeah, based on an overheard comment presented to someone who didn't expect work from you. So it was like the longest, like no reply to chat. 3 dots appear, they disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of like the equivalent of like, you see like a director sitting in a restaurant and just like, hey, can I audition for this thing right now? And like hoping that it works out. And fortunately it did. And this was, I think, a few months before I started working at Perception. So I went in for my interview, and then Danny and Jeremy were just like, oh, hey, want to see something that we just like finished working on? I was like, sure, why not? And I was like, oh, it's just Iron Man 2.
That's amazing. So Doug, when did you join up with these guys?
About 11 years ago at this point.
11 years ago.
Yeah.
Man.
So 11 years, and then Johnny, you're like 15 years or 16 years or something?
15 years, I think this month, something like that.
It's a lot of years.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's been a little bit.
Yeah, it's that's like an eternity in motion graphics time. That's a lot of frames.
So
right?
I'm curious, after Iron Man 2, what happens next? Do you have to keep campaigning, or does Marvel just like, all right, you're in from now on forever till the end of time?
No, I mean, Marvel works with an enormous number of the biggest visual effects vendors that have ever existed in the course of our industry. And so that wasn't us just like, oh, okay, cool. We're in now. And even today, I wouldn't say that we're like something like 25 movies deep or something. And I don't think there's any sense that we're like, oh, we're in, we'll just, we're expecting a call any minute now for the next one or anything like that. Like it's, but we're very happy to have a great relationship with them. They are amazing collaborators. And like over the next few films that we worked with them on, like we could feel the sense of like trust increasing dramatically. And, you know, getting to that point, you would think because they're operating at such a high level and they're such a sort of like intimidating client to have, that they would be very difficult to work with or work for. But they're blessed in that they're so successful that everybody has a certain level of like comfort and confidence in the work that they're doing, and the relationships that they have that work well, they are very trusting in them. And there isn't, you know, with other clients, whether it's other film studios or just any other client in any medium, you know, any client that has that sense of like panic or concern, or they are worried if the project's going to come together, you know, well or smoothly, those processes can always be miserable and very uncomfortable. And like they end up hurting the creative process so much because everybody's just so anxious about everything. And they're a great group that approach this stuff, you know, with a great level of like confidence, and they're tons of fun to collaborate with. So we're honored that we have this opportunity. I mean, a lot of our success is absolutely us kind of like, you know, just flying in their jet stream. You know, they have the positive attention that we receive for our work is, you know, to me, it's like 30% because of our work and 70% because it's attached to these beloved characters that people are so invested in and whatnot. So we couldn't be more thankful to have this ongoing relationship with the team at Marvel Studios.
That is so cool. And also, I happen to know this because I talked to you before on another show, a produced show here called Cheap Tricks, where that trust that you had with Marvel got extended to your work on Black Panther. And what I loved about that challenge was that at that point, there however many Marvel movies in they were. And I feel like the Tony Stark tech blue hologram thing was a decade old maybe at that point. And so, but they trusted you to figure out, how do we visualize something that is not the same as we've ever done before?
Yeah, that was a really cool challenge because that was like a new space for us at the time, right? Coming in before they shot anything, right? They didn't shoot a single frame of the movie before. We came in to help them visualize that stuff, and like that was a huge challenge. Is we know Tony Stark. We can kind of assume everyone in the world has known Tony Stark, and that all technology is kind of derived from like his look, right? If you look at what Tony Stark has, what SHIELD has, and it goes to Wakanda, who's isolated themselves from everything. Like, what would their technology look like? And that was a really cool, unique challenge to try and figure that out. Work with the directors, work with the producers, to kind of put all that stuff together.
And like for us, like we love this idea of conceptualizing and designing the future of tech. And there's been experiences that we've had in the past with other studios where they're just like, all right, so we need you guys to come in and just make like a whole bunch of like glowing blue shit that's just going to float in the background and remind people that the story takes place in the future. And that's like all it needs to do. And we'll be talking to them and like, so, you know, what we're thinking that maybe the information could be projected by this new technology paradigm that uses, the ambient humidity in the air to translate that into a refractive. And they're just like, no. Glowing
really?
Blue shit. Just give us a bunch of glowing blue hexagons so that people know it takes place in the future.
Well, hexagons are the shape of the future.
You know,
and I think that's.
And so, like when we're with Marvel, I mean, it's awesome because they are much more willing to take like a deeper dive into this stuff and really try and and have it be as thought out and have it be as unique and original. And I think that's reflected even in the so many of the characters in the stories are scientists and inventors and whatnot, and that they're interested in bringing that depth of thought into it, which I think is, as Doug was describing, it gives us a really good like opportunity to push the limits of what we expect from these kinds of materials.
Yeah, what I really like about it too is like the history or like sort of the thought process of how the things work might not ever be discussed in the film, right? It might not, there's never a scene where someone's like, ooh, what we're going to do is start using acoustic levitation. Like none of that comes through in the movie, but you can feel it kind of in the end product. And I think that's a big part of it too, is that we have these kind of crazy, wacky ideas and we can point to a little nugget of truth somewhere of a technology that maybe in 20, 30 years, you could see this doing a thing, that really helps sell the idea too. You're like, okay, we can see how this isn't magic. This is sort of based in some little kernel of science somewhere.
I always bring up one of my favorite movie interfaces or technology paradigms is in the Mission Impossible 4, I think it is, where they're in Russia and Tom Cruise and Simon Pegg are trying to sneak down this hallway.
It's so good.
They whip out this projection screen, and there's cameras that are tracking them, but are also tracking the gaze and basically the point of view that the guard is watching it through. And I'm sitting there watching that in the theater, and my wife's sitting next to me, and I turn to her and I'm like, Gloria, you got to understand, this is so cool. They're using the camera to track the gaze. And I'm saying this to her, and she like turns to me and she's just like, yeah, John, like everybody knows that's what it's doing. Shut up. Watch the movie. And I was just like, oh, that's great. Like that's the perfect job of that. Like when you can have this really complex technology that still is able to, convey immediately to an audience. To me, that's the holy grail.
It is. You're doing what's known as VFX explaining.
Yes.
100%. Oh my God, we're all guilty of it.
Yes, I try to not do that as much, but we all do that.
Well, I'll pause the show and be like, all right, kids, Dad's going to show you how they did this. And they're always like, we're going to show Dad we don't care. Like,
Dad, there's 5 minutes left. Can we
Get me a
finish the
C-stand.
episode?
Get me a C-stand.
No, hold on.
What do you guys have a favorite? Like, I don't want to say like movie, but in general, but like either title sequence or shot that you guys have done or effect you guys have done up to this point on anything?
I think you'll probably get a different answer from both of us. I think favorite effect that we've done, we did Zola in Captain America Winter Soldier. We did the sort of the Zola face in the computer screen.
Oh yeah.
That's a particular favorite of mine.
How'd you do that one?
So that one, it started out being this really long, convoluted process that by the end of it, you're like, oh, we could have done this much simpler than it had to be. But we actually had Toby Jones of like him acting with like tracking markers all over his face and all this stuff. And we ended up using like none of that. So like, no, make it simpler. But that's all done in After Effects. Lots of fancy layers. I mean, that was how many years ago was that now? I can't remember like specifics.
Don't tell me how many years ago. I'm going to get depressed because in my mind it was like last week or 2 years ago.
But it was just really cool because again, going into what is the technology of this, you look at the scene and it's just this football field size room of just like reel to reel computers and like, oh, all of his data lives on those reels. So what does that make him look like?
So you can pull up my screen.
Oh, I'm about to pull it up right here.
Then pull up your screen.
You got a video or an image?
A video.
Oh, you got a video? Yours is better. Here we go. Go on to Hashi's.
One of the things that was really fun about this was this started with a conversation with the Russo brothers who were directing Winter Soldier. And the first thing that they basically came to us saying was like, we're really worried that this whole thing could suck really bad. Like this could.
When you think about it, it's like, oh, we have a Nazi on a computer screen who's going to talk for 5 minutes.
Nazi trapped inside a computer.
Right.
Like it's not even just like it's a feed of him. It's like, no, he is a computer, and we're going to see him. And they were like, you read this in the script, and you could imagine this looking like Max Headroom and being just awful. And they sounded very concerned about it, and I was really proud that I think even in our first like design exploration, they were kind of mellowed out, or they were comforted by like, oh, okay, this could actually be this thing that is like ominous and weird. But for us more than anything, it was all driven by like taking what's happening in the scene. They're surrounded by all this antiquated equipment. And we had to find, a way of presenting something that felt as lo-fi as possible.
That is so cool.
Yeah, because kind of
what's the reference?
The Vectrex?
The Tektronix?
Tektronix, is that what it is?
4080. I got it somewhere.
But yeah, so this thing, and when Johnny says our early exploration, this is not indicative of what we usually do. We did this to ourselves. Our first exploration was, I think we had a little bit of downtime. And so we kind of said everyone in the studio, like, hey, everyone throw your hat in the ring. Let's do some explorations. And we ended up with like, I don't know, 20 different images or something like that. And we're like, you know what? We should just do a few more, and we could do directions A to Z for Arnim Zola, and that would be fun. Mm-hmm. And so our first drop to them was 26 different Zola images that I think we have all up on our site. And we don't normally do that, right? It's usually like, oh, here's like 5 directions or 3 direct, whatever it is. But this was just to let you know like how much fun we had. Like, we got to make this really cool. It's futuristic for the technology that it is, but it's still antiquated technology. But it was a ton of fun, and some stuff was like this. Some stuff was more like, more Max Headroom stuff. Some of it was like very clearly a picture of Toby Jones.
But the final image, the final image is made up of what are the elements going into the final image again?
So the final image, we started with a base of the actor Toby Jones. We ended up not using really any of his performance. We just used I think we used one of his performances of him just like talking lines, and he filled it on blue screen with tracking markers on his face and just kind of talking directly at the screen. And then we ended up going through this process of painting highlights on his face, right? Because we wanted to get this kind of really moody look to it, tracking those highlights to his face, and then using that to drive, I think some of it is trap code form. There's probably, what was the other plugin? I think it was Omino. Do you remember that thing, Johnny? The Omino squares?
It was one of the Omino things that was making all the stripes.
Wow.
Yeah, and then combined with a few other things, but all these things kind of stacked together, all these different layers thrown in, and all glowy and all that stuff. But it's really like, yeah.
All this speak of antiquated stuff. Just before the show, we were talking about our mutual love of being able to crack open After Effects and create something using all native filters and plugins, just to try to really like go as stripped down as you can to try to approximate things. And I feel very inspired to try doing a version of Zola in After Effects and try. This would be very doable.
Yeah,
trap code form.
Sure. I think so, and I think if we did it now, we'd probably do it a lot quicker than we did, whatever it was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, and I've said before on the show, like half of it is that journey of exploration to the cheat code of knowing what it looks like now means that I get to bypass all of the toil that goes into. I mean, you said you presented 20 plus versions of this to get to this point, and then that's something that I think is really wonderful to respect, especially when there are VFX tutorials on any of your things floating around. It's because that labor went into the original look, which is crazy.
Yeah, the original look is actually one of the funny things is I think this look is pretty close to one of our original directions that got picked and then changed drastically, then cut out of the movie entirely, and then like 3 months later be like, we're gonna bring it back and we actually want to go back to that first look that you guys did. And so it was a real roller coaster to get there. But part of the exploration too was going into things like his eyes are just black, right? And it's just a whole exploration of how much of his eye do we want to see? Do we want to see the eyes, make him feel more human? Do we want to just do pinpoints in the eyes? Do we want to just remove the eyes?
It's funny how much of it works. It's funny how much it works because he has no eyes. Like the lack of eyes makes it genuinely ominous and almost like it almost like gets you a huge way in that quest for not being stupid, for not being dumb, and actually being like working. Because from like a story standpoint and a tonal standpoint, it's like it feels really freaking ominous, like just from the void of eyes alone.
Yeah, that's so we had a version that had 2 little pinpoints for eyes, which I really liked, but something about that felt, I don't know, too like it was like he was just a skull with these little pinpoint eyes. And but then we also tried things where if you look at his mouth is a little wider than the actor's real mouth, because if you look at the comics, Zola's got this big wide mouth, and we're like, oh, let's hint at that a little bit and just stretch out the mouth. And
oh, what a cool idea.
You know, trying to just little subtle nods to the comics. There was a pass at this where his mouth was moving, and then we decided to like, let's tone that down and just do like a waveform for his mouth. So all of these little things are what add to, you know, the process taking so long to make one of these. And now we see what the final looks like. We cut out all of that kind of exploration. You're like, oh, I could probably make that really quickly right now.
That is so wonderful.
For us, one of the things that I think always helps us is trying to find some sort of, you know, logic or rails or some reference that ties some of this stuff back to reality. Like we never want this tech to just feel like magic, to feel like it's just totally make-believe. We want to try and bring some authenticity to it. If you don't mind pulling up my screen, I've got like one of our original hero references for this, which was this is the Tektronix 4006. Tektronix make like oscilloscopes and some of the very earliest like graphics plotting.
Oh my gosh, I love this
computers.
Stuff.
And like, just like for us, it was just like, yeah, when you see it like this and when you see how like it looks like every image or every line or every element feels like it's being like burnt in to the screen. Like it doesn't feel like it's pixels turning on or off. It feels like this is like a glass ball of radioactivity that has these things just like burning into it and leaving this persistence of image behind. And so that was one of the key things that I think motivated the direction that, you know, we were just looking at, as well as several others. We have so many. If you go digging on our site, I think we've got somewhere like a montage of like 100 faces of Zola or something like that that we had.
I would like a coffee table book, but please. I would like all of these to be arranged into a coffee table book called The 100 Faces of Zola.
So that book is actually called The 100 Faces of Zola. It comes out this fall.
Oh, Hashi's done. He left. He's. I actually have a feeling he's going to shoot a plate. To be honest, he's probably going to go film himself now, or what's he doing? You putting your Zola mask on, Hash? I can't hear you, Hash. You're either muted or I'm not sure what's going on.
So closest thing that I have to a Zola mask is this pod racing helmet.
Nice.
Anakin's awesome. Pod racing helmet, but it does have some nice rims.
Yep.
Just like them.
Hey, where'd you guys get this footage of the Tektronix thing?
We were hunting and hunting for we were just hunting for all sorts of stuff of like vintage graphics.
Oh, I didn't know if you found one or something, or like visited some tech museum of some kind or something like that?
I would love to have one of these, and we've got a pretty long laundry list of, antiquated bits of display tech that we always find ourselves referring back to over and over again. Whether it's stuff like that. My number one favorite reference of all time here. I'm just going to pull up one more thing. This is something we always
do on the.
Yeah, it's Quake. Come on, Doug.
Quake.
It's Quake. Quake being played on an oscilloscope.
Holy
Somebody found this technique for taking the graphics and turning it, translating the graphics into like sound frequencies that the oscilloscope would pick up and re-render as graphics. I love this so much. It is so incredible, and like the fact that like when it's static or it's still like
motion,
it looks like garbage, but when it's moving around, you immediately see all the depth and all the space that's in there.
I hope that if Stu Maschwitz was watching, that he was sitting in a seated position
before he sees this, because this is unreal. Oh my gosh! Then the way that I love. Have you guys?
It's not Unreal, Seth. They didn't have Unreal Engine back then.
Michael, do we have to go on a permission-only system here for you to speak? No, I want to. Did you directly? Okay. I have 80 million questions about this thing. Well, first off, is there anything that we've seen in a movie that you did that this directly influenced?
Yeah, this tied in a little bit to some work that we did on, and for us, I think this reference came up, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but while we were working on Thor Ragnarok, and we were trying to come up with some ways of making holograms for that film that had a different feeling, and that feeling
we feel like Tony Stark.
Yeah, we didn't want it to feel like Tony Stark, and we wanted it to feel like pure, chaotic Taika Waititi.
These are like the big building like the ones with Goldblum coming up over like the city and talking and such.
So we didn't technically do those, but we did several others, and I think there was like some cross pollination with some of the concepts and ideas. Let me see.
I think we did early look dev on that Jeff Goldblum stuff, and then that got sent off to, I forget who. I don't know. Got sent off to someone else who did it.
What does that feel like, by the way? Because I know that these Marvel movies are such a huge collaboration between people trying to share assets, mimic other people's works, people who've worked out concepts and another studio is producing. How often are you pleased, surprised, upset at a version of something that you prototyped when you see it at the final?
Yeah, sometimes it's great, and sometimes like, I wouldn't have done that, or like, they didn't use that, like what we felt was the core idea that didn't make it in. But then it goes through so many people. But there are times where we'll come up and pitch some stuff, and then it goes to someone else. We're like, "Oh, thank God," because I didn't know how we were going to make that in the movie. So. And someone else had to worry about
something amazing in this video you're playing right here. I had never realized that you pulled the shapes and patterns from Kirby straight up into the UI, like the way it showed it at the beginning of that video.
Yeah, that was really important to us on this, and not just us. I mean, that was important to Marvel and to Taika Waititi, that it was really a love letter to Kirby that we haven't quite seen before. I think
so good.
People impersonate Kirby and you get the vibe of it, but it was really important that they grabbed like the actual shapes and design language that he used. So we tried to do that as much as we could in this, and hopefully that comes through in the work, that they're like, oh yeah, that is Kirby would do something like that.
Funny anecdote. Just funny thing about that, while we were working on this.
Oh, is this the tweet that gave me a heart attack?
Yeah, we had designed. So they had designed this logo for marketing, but we added in all the Kirby detailing and kind of greebling that happens. And we did a CineSync session with the filmmakers
And that CineSync, for those who don't know, because I feel like Johnny, most people probably don't know what CineSync is just like a Zoom or Skype or something that we can use where we can all have the same file and play that back in real time, so there's no lag, and it's just a way to sort of collaboratively work with the studio because we're not in the same room, so we can both look at the same thing and with minimal lag like we would have here, Zoom or something.
And so we presented this via a CineSync session to the director, Taika Waititi, and several others who just happened to be in the room. One of which was Kevin Feige, who is the president of Marvel Studios and the guy who's like single-handedly responsible for their amazing success. About 10 minutes after that meeting, we looked.
I was walking back to my desk.
Yeah, like we were scrolling through Twitter and literally came across this. And Kevin Feige, during the CineSync session, took a picture of this and tweeted it out because it was also Jack Kirby's 100th. It was like
his 100th birthday, right?
100th birthday, and he put this out there as a tribute to him. I had a really easy time finding this tweet because like Kevin Feige's tweeted,
I think he has 2 tweets.
Yeah, he's tweeted like 50 times ever, and this was one of them. And we were just scrolling through and we were like, wait a second, the thing we just did like leaked onto Twitter. Feige's going to kill us. And then we were like, wait a second. Feige,
It was Feige.
Feige leaked it.
Feige leaked it. Oh my.
That was a fun like 2-minute heart attack because that's kind of the biggest fears that the stuff that we're working on like leaks out into the world, and it's like, oh god.
When that Spider-Man
no,
trailer leaked a while back, and I didn't see the leak, but I obviously saw a trailer of it, but I just saw a caption or something that said, described it as being watermarked with someone's name, and I like had a heart attack for that person the second I read that.
Yep. Oh yeah. But then you think, like, did that guy, like, I know nothing about this, but I assume it was probably like someone, because it looked like a cell phone video of a screen of an unfinished trailer. So my mind is just like, oh, is that like that guy's roommate did that or something? Like, I don't know. I felt bad for that person because, it all stems back to what it was. Wolverine. What was the movie that like the whole movie leaked with unfinished?
That was Wolverine.
Yeah, that was Wolverine.
But then they released it with unfinished visual effects, so
Yeah, I was gonna say, and like the person who leaked it ended up getting arrested. Like, oh, it ruined our box office. I was like,
no, it wasn't even the person that leaked it got arrested. It was like a guy who was selling it off of a blanket, out in front of Penn Station or whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
Like they were like, "This is it. We found the kingpin of the whole operation," and they just like destroyed some guy's life while whoever it was that worked in the finishing house or whatever that leaked it out got away scot-free.
So piracy isn't a victimless crime. Is the thesis of our show. Everybody.
We've got some questions coming in from the chat throughout this episode. I want to make sure we do address them at some point. Specifically, just kind of more general overall questions, really, before we start diving into more specifics on maybe WandaVision or some of the other things. Just what kind of software in general do you guys use in your pipeline?
We are primarily Cinema and After Effects. Those are our 2 go-to workhorses, everyday stuff. We'll also use Houdini and Nuke for if we need those things. But Cinema, 4D, After Effects are kind of the 2 everyday. Every person in the office is using those.
Cool, me too. Another question is what's your creative process to be really efficient? Because you're having to do all these turnarounds. How do you keep efficient as you work through this?
I see Johnny laughing over there.
Yeah, I would say efficiency and just generally like speed is a staple of our workflow at Perception. Even though we've had a lot of growth in the last few years, I would say we're still a considerably small team when you look at the scope or scale of some of the projects that we're working on. And we put a really big emphasis on efficiency and speed just because it'll, more than anything, we want to make sure that we're we're moving with momentum. We're keeping a pace, but that we also have a certain level of like confidence in our ideas that we're putting out there, so that we can commit to them. We can start moving them into, further into the production process and commit more to whatever ideas and concepts we're exploring. We talk a lot about obsessing over the ideal level of fidelity at which you work, right? Like, many of us have a impulse to show how high of a fidelity we can reach as just something that is like, that is my metric for success, is can I make the most realistic or the most detailed looking thing ever? But we spend a lot of time encouraging team members to work rough and fast, to work lo-fi and sloppy. And that way, just to keep an emphasis on like the ideas or the concepts that are driving what we're putting together. And as long as we can like flesh that out the most and do it really rapidly, and also do it in a way where we're not getting like too attached to or too in love with our ideas, or just being like, well, I can't throw that away. It took me 2 days to make that thing. Whereas if it's like, oh, that was a test that took me 90 minutes. If we have to kill it for the sake of the greater good, like that's no big deal. And like that to us, I think just keeps the focus on the right things, on the ideas, on the concepts. And then when that stuff is getting fleshed out, then we can push that fidelity that much further and dial it in. Because I think at the end of the day, you can go really deep down the wrong tunnel or down the wrong pathway on a project, before you realize that the core concept or the core idea maybe isn't working. And that's when things get really turned inside out.
Never experienced that ever.
Yeah, I think because what it is, what we've realized with this stuff, and it goes to when we're talking about like the Black Panther stuff too, is like 9 times out of 10, the idea is the thing that they're buying off on, not the visual fidelity of the thing that we've produced. So, really figuring out that fidelity, what is the least amount of work you can put into something to tell the idea the most efficient way. And that's kind of that sweet spot that we like to work at. Cause like Johnny's saying, you work 2 days on the most beautiful image, and then the client looks at it for, 5 minutes and goes, I don't like that one. Let's look at another thing. And you're like, oh no, I spent so much time on that. So we've gone into pitches with like napkin sketches and being like, see this stick figure, we're thinking it does this thing. And it's like, that's a cool idea. Let's see what that looks like. And then, you can move on. But it's, finding the fidelity to work at.
John, you've got something on your screen. Did you have something on your screen you wanted to show, John? Or was that just something that was already?
Oh, no, I'm just doing my online banking right now. Please don't share my screen.
Michael, hit us with some more.
I was just going to say, I think that the concept of getting a good idea and a reason for something happening down first that makes sense before you start working on making the look perfectly finessed is an amazing tip for people who are just starting out and doing FUI stuff or even visual effects. Magical spell to move this thing from here to there. Well, maybe think about why that magic is doing it, how that magic is doing it before you start trying to come up with what sort of blue glowy stuff should be happening.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that we would think that, like, if you have, there's a magical spell that's moving a thing. Like, all right, well, what's the spell? How is the spell doing it? Is it moving it through air? Well, that's going to change how it looks. Is it moving it through levitation? Well, that's going to change how it looks. Is it moving it because it's creating something? So it's kind of trying to figure out what is the backbone of that idea, and then you can build off of that, because when everyone agrees, like, oh, the spell is air, it's an air spell that's doing it. Like, okay, we all agree what direction we're going down. We're going down, it's an air spell. And then, you don't end up making 20 different things, and someone's just like, I don't like the color green, let's do a different one. Like, oh, but that's not the point.
Right? Yeah, and Hashi and Seth, you guys are really good at this notion that, like, not getting too caught up or obsessed with like the finer nuance of the light wrap on a composite character, when like just having some really good camera shake is going to make the scene or the moment that much more impactful or exciting or interesting.
It's interesting you say that specifically, because I hadn't realized you guys did the retro titles for WandaVision as well as the main on ends. You did. I think I've got some clips here of. Actually, let's look at these. Yeah, the '80s one is one of my favorites. And
yeah, this one was.
I gotta know.
That's because the '80s are your favorites.
They're actually okay. They tend to have the most interesting visual. But the reason I bring this up is the way it ties in with what you just said was, I have a like. Weirdly, I don't have a lot of hobbies, but I would say one of them is weirdly like recreating the look of like of old or outdated stuff. Like I've done it for like a bunch of Red Giant promos and stuff. It's my favorite to try and figure out what are the tiny nuances that all together make up this recipe that equals the thing that we all know and love. And it's so often it's like it's the tiny it's usually like 2 or 3 key elements that go into it, and it's not often the broad strokes that people think it is. So I'd love to hear about your process behind some of these openers because they're so good.
Oh, thank you. This was a ton of fun because, as you can imagine, it's a lot of research. So there's a long time of like, hey, we're just going to watch sitcoms. We're going to watch I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke and Growing Pains. Like, we're just going to watch sitcoms and really kind of digest. It gets tricky because, the access we have to it is an old YouTube video that is all compressed. We have to like really like, okay, what are we finding here? Let's try and find the best one. But, it's starting with the source material. It's starting with, really looking into what makes it great. Like, I think this shot is a great example of kind of the nuance we're trying to put into here of how would they do this effect if they were to actually shoot a paintbrush coming in with magic, how would they do it? And one of the things like, all right, well, they'd probably put it on strings and like move it into the thing. So we try and add a little bit of that it's on strings kind of wobble going into it. We did play a lot with like, well, the magic would be probably hand-drawn, after the fact on film, but then it turned to like, well, it still has to look like Wanda's magic, so it still has to look like Wanda's magic, but kind of looking into those things, like how would they build this if they were actually to do this at the time, and trying to find all those little nuances. So you can see like the pen's got a little bit of the paintbrush has a little bit of a wobble to it. It's not like a smooth line. Yeah. So trying to find that stuff in this one, I think in what was it? Some of the early ones, like the 50s ones, like how would they do that type and what would happen? Like, they'd probably cut it out by hand, or they'd paint it by hand and put it on top. And
did you
trying to find that?
Well, like so, I love the Agatha ones because I love the transition on with.
Oh, apparently Marvel is not happy with us showing that title sequence because our stream has just now been suspended for policy.
No.
Seth, you had it up too long.
Party foul.
Crap. Well, so no one can watch our stream anymore?
Well, it just says stream unavailable, suspend for policy violations.
Oh, no.
I'm so sorry, guys. I had no idea. Well. Okay.
All right. Here.
We go. Well, welcome to our new podcast, VFX and Chill.
Should I stop streaming and start again? Michael, what do you think?